I believe that today we'll be in a position, please God, to actually complete this mimer. So that's a good thing. Let's briefly look at what it is that we've done so far. So what have we done so far? We have learnt that there's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba. Every single one of us has a portion in the world to come. Okay, that's very nice. And then we have to understand, so what is this world to come that we're speaking about? We have to understand what it is. So we say, what is the world to come? The world to come refers to after the coming of Mashiach, during the period of the resurrection of the dead. That's what we call Olam Haba, the world to come. That immediately raised a question for us, because we do know that there's an experience called Gan Eden. And Gan Eden is reserved for neshamas after they pass away. And one of the things that we know is that Gan Eden, not every neshama will necessarily share the experience of Gan Eden, and not every neshama will necessarily experience it in the same way. Plus, we also learn that within Gan Eden there are many levels, and in order to transport yourself, or in order for the neshama to move from one level to the next level, takes a tremendous amount of effort. There's a shedding of the previous state. There's an amud, this spiritual column that the neshama has to go through. So we need to understand how it is that Gan Eden has so many entry requirements and so many details for how the neshama will move from level to level to level, yet Olam Haba, which is after Mashiach comes, and is this incredible revelation of godliness, is somehow open to everybody. That did not seem to add up for us. So we began to explain a number of things that would help us to put this into context. First of all, the experience of Gan Eden is the reward for a neshama's Torah learning. That's the primary goal of Gan Eden, to reward a soul for the person's efforts in Torah study while they were alive. And because Torah study is personal, nobody learns Torah at exactly the same level. Nobody learns Torah in exactly the same way. One person understands this way, one person understands that way. One person is more intelligent, one person less intelligent. One person has more background, one person less background. This person has a rational mind, that person has a creative mind. So every person's experience of Torah is 100% individual. Therefore, it makes sense that if Gan Eden is the response, the spiritual reward for learning Torah, it makes sense that it should be completely unique to each individual. Not a catch-all, not a one-size-fits-all. Each individual will have a unique experience. And so if each individual will have a unique experience, that includes the possibility that certain individuals will have no experience because they did not engage with Torah, so they don't speak this language. And when Gan Eden becomes available, they just don't relate to it. It doesn't talk to them. It doesn't connect with them. Likewise, because the experience of Gan Eden is associated with Torah learning, and Torah learning is a gradual process like any other learning, it makes sense that you will continuously graduate. So neshamas will be on this constant movement, as we say, Yeichul Mechayel El Choyel. There's no rest. There's no peace. You know, everybody always says rest in peace. I don't know if from a Jewish perspective that's actually a brocha. The Gemara tells us tzaddikim ein lohem menucha, that the righteous have no rest. They're constantly moving and growing. That's the most beautiful thing in the world, is that you can constantly move and grow. However, because it is personal and because it is gradual, so therefore you can expect that there are times where neshama has to move beyond, it has to mature beyond, it has to leave behind what happened in a previous state and a previous level in order to be able to access and to appreciate the next level. The time of Mashiach, on the other hand, specifically the time of the resurrection, that is the period of reward for mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are not so clearly demarcated between one person and the next. This Jew puts on tefillin, 100% tefillin value. That Jew puts on tefillin, 100% tefillin value. It's not personal. It's not depends who you are. Depends who you are. You hear the shofar. You get everybody into shul on Rosh Hashanah. It's literally everybody, from one extreme of the community to the other. And they all hear the shofar. What happens? Everybody hears the same sound. And everybody gets the equivalent mitzvah. One mitzvah, blowing shofar. And everybody gets it equally. Nobody gets more shofar mitzvah and less shofar mitzvah. So therefore, if the time of Olam Haba, the time of the resurrection, is a reward for mitzvahs, we all are included. And we're all included equally because we've all got mitzvahs on our resume. Then we took it a step further and we said the truth is that that period of the resurrection, Olam Haba, can actually be split into two phases. The initial phase is the reward for mitzvahs, which is really beautiful and really great and equally shared with everybody. And then there's an even deeper experience of that period, which is where Hashem reveals not just the fact that He loves us for having done His mitzvahs, but the fact that He loves us because we're us. So that's this incredible, absolutely inclusive experience where Hashem says there's no judgment, there's no distinction between one person and the next, there's no class. Everybody is absolutely valuable in my eyes, says Hashem. Now we read about it. Now it's a theoretical concept. When Mashiach comes, and specifically at the time of the resurrection, that will become reality. And so that's why every person gets to share in the experience of the world to come, because it's an experience that is not based on earning it. It's not based on behavior. It's not based on study. It's not based on conforming. It's based on the very fact that we have a neshama. Good enough. And we all have a neshama. So we're all in. We then said that in order to understand this concept better, we needed to explain the difference between two primary flows of energy that come from Hashem into the world. The first primary kind of energy is what we call memale kol olmen, the energy with which Hashem fills every part of the world perfectly. So if, for example, you had to imagine that you had a whole series of containers and you needed to fill those containers appropriately, so the larger containers would be filled with more and the smaller containers would be filled with less. By the same token, Memale Kol Olmin means the more spiritual beings get more godliness, the less spiritual beings get less godliness. It's Memale. Everything is calibrated to fit exactly in the way that it should. Gan Eden is an expression of and an experience of Memale Kol Olmin. That means to say, Hashem says, I want to reveal myself, I want to share myself, I want to show you myself, but only relative to what you can handle based on how much you worked on yourself. So the person who worked on themselves less, the person who studied less, can only receive less revelation. The person who worked on themselves more and studied more and encountered more can receive more revelation. And when a neshama has to be upgraded from level 1 Gan Eden to level 2 Gan Eden, then what needs to happen is that neshama also has to go through a process of broadening its outlook, broadening its mind. So it can no longer think with the limited thinking of level 1 of Gan Eden, because then it wouldn't appreciate the possible experience of level 2 of Gan Eden. And that's why we said that in order for a soul to progress from one level of Gan Eden to the next, it has to first strip away how it was before, the outlook that it used to have, the understanding that it used to have, so that now it can be open to something greater. Not unlike when a person has to forget how to think like a child in order to think like an adult. So that's called Memale Kol Olmin, and where we're up to right now is we're going to speak again about this principle of Memale Kol Olmin in a very particular way. However, before we do that, let's just also look into what the other flow of energy is, and that's called Soivev Kol Olmin. Soivev means that it's an energy from Hashem that is beyond. It cannot be calibrated. It's not suited to the individual. It's Hashem revealing Himself, so to speak, as He is, not as we are. So when Hashem expresses Memale Kol Olmin, He wants to know, who are you? What can you handle? How much intensity before you fry your brains? Okay, that's how much I'll give you. Soivev Kol Olmin is, this is me. This is me. I don't get into the nitty-gritty of you're this capable, you're that capable, you have those limitations, you have achieved this, you haven't achieved that. I am sharing me. Now, the upside of that is that when Hashem speaks, so to speak, from His perspective, then my failings are no longer an issue, because He's not trying to fit into my world. So if my world has problems, that's not going to interfere with the fact that He wants to express Himself. So when we talk about the revelation of Hashem that will happen in the time of the resurrection of the dead, that's what we're talking about, where Hashem is going to express himself and share himself regardless, this is key, regardless of where we're up to, regardless of whether we're ready or not, deserving or not. Okay, so that's kind of what brought us up to this point. We also learned in this paragraph, so we're in paragraph Vav, which you can see on the screen, and what we learned in this paragraph is that when King Solomon was able to give 3,000 different parables on any given topic, that was a good way of understanding Memale Kol Almin. I can speak to 3,000 different levels of human being, and they'll all get it exactly as they need to get it. So we're about just less than halfway down this paragraph. You'll see towards the end of the particular line I'm referring to, there's a number 43 for the footnotes, and then there's the beginning of a bracket. So we're going to start inside that bracket. We can now, based on what we've spoken about specifically in this paragraph about the Memale Kol Almin, calibrated, personalized version of divine revelation, we can now understand something that is quoted in many places in Chassidus, שגם האבויס ומוישה רבינו שיושבים בגן עדן העליון יויסר מגימל אלפים שנה יבואו להסלבש בגופים. It's quite an intriguing concept. We've already described that Gan Eden is a place of divine revelation. We've also described that that divine revelation is relative to how much effort a person employed while they were alive. So when you and I get into Gan Eden, it will be a much lower entry level than, let's say, for example, when Moshe Rabbeinu got into Gan Eden. Because he had experienced Torah at the highest possible level. So when he entered Gan Eden, he came in there fluent in the language. His eyes were completely open. He had no impediment, no training required. He was plugged right into the VIP suite. And then, for the last 3,000 odd years, on at least an annual basis, because every single year on a Yortzeit, the Neshama is elevated to a higher experience of Gan Eden. So at least annually, except in Moshe's case, it happens more frequently than that. We're not going to go into why that is right now. But suffice to say this much, that every time we do something that is because of the influence of somebody else, then Neshama is elevated. So because Moshe obviously had the greatest influence over all of us, any time that any of us learns, and any time that we grow in it, Moshe is elevated because of that. So 3,000 odd years, Moshe's been up there in Gan Eden, going higher and higher, which means experiencing a greater revelation of Hashem, and then a greater revelation of Hashem multiplied 3,000 times over. You can imagine by this time what kind of incredible insight into godliness Moshe has. And yet, when Moshiach comes and we experience the resurrection of the dead, Moshe's soul has to come back down here into earth. Fascinating. Why? Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to come back here? He's 3,000 at least levels divorced from our reality. Let's just put this into context for 1 second. For 1 second. So they tell a story of two neshamas that meet in the corridors of heaven. One neshama is on its way back from earth. Just finished its life and it's now going to Gan Eden. The other neshama is on its way to earth. It's about to be dispatched. So they meet in the corridor. So the new neshama says to the old neshama, quickly, I've got 10 seconds. Tell me something about what life will be like on earth. So the old neshama says, well, when you go down to earth, you can buy a pair of tefillin for about 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 rand. What? Unbelievable! Do you understand what tefillin can achieve? Do you understand the spiritual realms that it opens, the connection that it makes between a person and God, something that is unavailable here in heaven? Fantastic! And he goes rushing off, so excited to be a citizen of this world. And the old soul shouts after him, he says, Hey, I haven't yet told you how difficult it is to earn 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 rand. In other words, they're two totally different realities. There's a heavenly reality and there's an earthly reality. And the fact is that the minute you move from the one reality in either direction, you move from the one reality to the other reality, you very quickly forget what it was like in the other reality. And those things are suddenly no longer valuable, or other things become valuable. So in our world right now, what do we care about? You read anything. What do people care about? People care about money. People care about having experiences. I want to go to this place so I can experience that culture. I want to have this kind of a car because that will give me these safety features and a smooth driving experience. I want to have this kind of clothing because whatever. That gadget. These are the values that we have in this world. How do you assess that somebody is successful in this world? Because either they're very well known and they have who knows how many people following them on social media, or because they have a lot of money, or because they've invented or created something. That's how people are rated in this world. That quiet person who sits in the corner at shul and nobody barely acknowledges them, that person's not such a big chap in this world. So a person goes one level up, and then Shama leaves this world and goes to Shamayim. What happens in Shamayim? They arrive over there and say, okay, what have you got? What have you brought us? So me, I own 3 different multinational corporations. I have X amount of money in my account. I have this kind of share portfolio. I have a holiday home in the south of France. I drive this kind of a car. I have this many people who love me. They say, Shkoyach, thank you very much. Unfortunately, none of that is currency in this reality. Okay, so what is valuable in this reality? Did you help people? Did you grow as a human being? Did you learn? Did you fulfill what the Torah expects of you? Did you do any of those things? Oh, that little guy in the corner of shul, remember the guy that you never deigned to look at because he's such a big deal? He's got the currency. He's got the currency for this world. Initially, it's quite a shock, as you can well imagine. What? Now, you're suddenly talking a language that I don't understand, but like everything else in life, you become accustomed to it. If you've ever spoken to a person who's emigrated, they'll tell you in the beginning it's really, really difficult. Different culture and different expectations, different rules, often a very different language. Even if they speak English, it might not necessarily be the same language. It's a huge adjustment. Come back to that same person a couple of years down the line, and there they are. They're speaking with the same nuances and the same twang of that particular accent, and now they can't even relate. What do you mean you don't stop at a red light? This is Sydney. You've got to stop at a red light. What do you think you're in Joburg? Like, they forget that these things exist. So we change. The longer a person lives in a new environment, the more divorced they become from the old environment. Why on earth would Moshe want to come back down here? He's had 3,000 years of peeling away layer upon layer upon layer of the greatness of Hashem, of the infinite light. You're going to come back down here into this world and have to worry about where you're getting your coffee in the morning so you can be in a good mood. That's what Moshe wants? Come back down into this world. Doesn't make any sense. I can understand some of us perhaps are not of that caliber. Okay, so we got to come back and experience whatever value there might be in the resurrection. But Moshe Rabbeinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, these great personalities, they have to come back down here into this world to get some kind of a benefit that their incredible, powerful souls could not get in Gan Eden. Doesn't seem to make sense. Why is it? So he explains to us over here, this is one of the most critical teachings about understanding how Judaism views the future. Some cultures believe that we're living, enjoy it, because at some point there's going to be the apocalypse and we're all going to die. Other people believe, no, there'll be the great day of judgment. Some people will be put into eternal damnation, and other people will be put into this wonderful experience. Lahavdil, how does Judaism see it? Judaism says everything up until this point in time has just been training. We ain't seen nothing yet. In other words, what Hashem has to reveal to us is so profound and so powerful and so beyond anything that we could begin to imagine that we will typically believe higher realms, more spiritual places are more likely or more attuned to that reality. They're not. That's what we've got to get into our head. They're not. What does it mean they're not? So probably one of the most important things that we talk about a lot in Chassidus is to understand the concept of being infinite. So I know some of you have, we've done this together before, so we'll revise it. But the concept of infinity is very simply as follows. If I have in my bank account 100,000 Rand, and you have in your bank account 1 million Rand, you are more wealthy than me. Is it possible that in a day, a week, a month, a year, that could reverse? Of course it's possible. Because I could earn another 1 million Rand, and then I'll be ahead of you. Or God forbid, you could lose money and you could go behind me. So the nature of anything that is finite is that even though the one is ahead of the other, the one is better than the other, the one is higher than the other, they are relative to each other, and as long as they are relative, you could catch up, you could overtake, you could fall behind, all of those things are relevant. But what happens if you and I together, we each have 1 million Rand in our account, and then we meet somebody who, through some incredible, miraculous, supernatural experience, has infinite money. Infinite money means that whatever they spend is automatically replenished in their account, so they never ever run out. Infinite money. They can never spend everything they have. So now, can we ever catch up? Starting from a base of 1 million Rand, can you ever catch up to the person who has infinite money? No. It's impossible. Because to get from 1 million to infinity is an infinite distance. Not only that, but you and I each have 1 million Rand, and then we meet a beggar on the street who has nothing. Literally, you give them 1 Rand, that's the 1 Rand they have. So he's got 1 Rand, we've got 1 million Rand, that guy's got infinite money. We are no closer than the beggar to that man's wealth. Because from my 1 million to infinity is infinity, and from his 1 Rand to infinity is infinity. Now that's a really important thing for us to understand. As that is in money terms, which is just obviously a hypothetical example because you can never have infinite money, it's exactly the same in spiritual terms. If I am at a spiritual level of 10, and there's some neshama in Gan Eden who is on a spiritual level of 10,000, so there's no question about it that neshama is more advanced than me. There's no question about it that whatever that neshama is capable of understanding is greater than what I'm capable of understanding. So therefore I look up to that neshama and I say, you are ahead of me in the game. Not only that, you're in Gan Eden. In Gan Eden, the capacity for understanding is level 1 million. I'm on earth. On earth, the capacity for understanding is level 20,000. So not only are you ahead of me, but you're in a reality that offers more spiritually than my reality offers. So you'll always be ahead of me. Until one day I'm in Gan Eden, there's nothing to discuss. Now we've got to ask ourselves this question. What level of spirituality / holiness is Hashem? Is Hashem level 10, level 10,000, level 1 million? What level is Hashem? So the correct answer would be no level. He's beyond levels. Levels are what you use to measure things that are finite, and Hashem is infinite. So, Gan Eden, even when somebody's on level 1 million in Gan Eden, their distance from where Hashem is, their distance from godliness as God is as distant as I am here on earth. So if I want to compare experience, how much I can understand, appreciate, then the Gan Eden person is way ahead of me. And I've got a lot of learning to do. And I'm going to have to go through many, many steps. And each step is going to have to be getting rid of an old way of thinking and adopting a new way of thinking. But if I want to get to Hashem, there's absolutely no difference if I'm here on earth feeling completely limited, or if I'm in Gan Eden feeling completely elevated. The distance between me and Hashem remains the same, infinite. So where's Hashem more? Is Hashem more here on earth, or is Hashem more in Gan Eden? The answer is wherever He chooses. If He chooses to pull away the veil and to reveal his infinite self in Gan Eden, then that's the place where it's going to be. But equally, if he chooses to do that here on earth, that's the place that it's going to be. And that's what he's chosen. He's chosen that when the time will come to reveal his infinite essence, that will happen on earth. So it would be worthwhile for all those neshamas that have gone through all of that spiritual growth and development over an incredibly long period of time in Gan Eden, it would be worth their while to come down into earth, because what earth will have, Gan Eden can never have. So Moshe and the forefathers and the matriarchs, they all come back down here onto earth, not because earth has something to offer that heaven doesn't, but because this is where Hashem will choose to reveal himself, as he's told us many, many times throughout the Tanakh. Now, to understand that a little bit better, we're going to just focus in on the words for a moment. Why is it that we specifically say that those great souls are up in heaven and have been in Gan Eden for 3,000 years or more? Why is the period of time that important to us? Why don't you just say for millennia? Why 3,000? Now, you should already realize where this is going, because we've spoken about the number 3,000 already in this paragraph, and we've described that Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, used 3,000 parables to explain a concept. This is now, so to speak, the reverse. So yesh loymar, the gimel alofim shana hem dugma shloishes alofim moshel, shem keneged gimel olam es bria yitzira asiya, the b'chol olam yesh 1,000 madregois. In the same way as we've spoken about the fact that King Solomon's brilliance was his ability to take a concept and bring it down level by level by level by level, 3,000 levels down, we're now going to have our first real insight into what the significance of 3,000 is. Except that here we won't be talking about bringing it down, we'll be talking about rising up. So if the teacher can teach 3,000 parables, the student wants to then climb 3,000 levels of understanding. That's basically the concept. All of reality as we know it falls neatly into three categories, which we call the spiritual realms: Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Bria is the realm of the most incredible spiritual beings, including the greatest angels and the most elevated neshamas. So when we speak about Moshe and the forefathers and the matriarchs being in the highest levels of Gan Eden, they're actually tuned into this level called Bria. One layer down from that is what we call the realm of Yetzirah. Yetzirah is also a very spiritual place. There are lesser angels there, and that's where most souls spend their experience of Gan Eden. So what distinguishes Bria from Yetzirah is the degree of divine revelation. Asiya, which is the lowest of the three realities, that's a reality that, generally speaking, is clueless about anything divine. And guess what? That's actually where we live. Now, numbers in Judaism are very significant. The number that is a complete system is 10. 10 is the number of a complete system. So Hashem creates the world using 10 utterances. He gives us a Torah that is founded on 10 primary laws. He designs a neshama that has 10 soul powers, and he runs his entire existence of 10 sephiros, 10 divine radiations. Of course, if 10 is the whole number, you have to appreciate that each organism within the system of 10 also comprises 10. In other words, if we talk about, for example, Chesed as one of the 10 spheros, the 10 emanations of godliness, within the world of Chesed, there are 10 emanations. So really the number of completion is actually 100. Because 100 talks about how there are 10 facets to everything that exists, and within those 10 facets, there are 10 facets. That's why, for example, when we talk about a person reaching spiritual perfection, it's associated with the age of 100. So Abraham, at 99 years old, still has to take the radical decision to have a bris. 99 means not yet at the point of perfection. Or like the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos at the end of the 5th chapter, it says when a person reaches the age of 100, it is as if they're no longer in this world, because they've reached a stage that is beyond this world. That's what 100 represents. And so generally speaking, throughout all mystical texts, you will find that the number 10 is the number of wholeness, the number 100 is the number of perfection, and the number 1,000, so that's each of the 100 components as they're comprised of 10 facets, that represents the fullest spectrum of any given level of existence. So if we talk about a realm, a level of existence called Bria, the realm of spiritual awareness and insight, it will have 1,000 components to it. If we talk about a realm called Yetzirah, the level of spiritual awareness and excitement, it will have 1,000 levels to it. If we talk about the realm called Asiya, the realm of spiritual lack of awareness, it will also have 1,000 components to it. So if we talk about being in Gan Eden for 3,000 years, actually what we're alluding to is climbing through all the 3,000 potential experiences of divine awareness, from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. That's actually what we mean. Just like King Solomon used 3,000 parables to bring a concept from the highest, most sublime level to the most practical level, so in reverse, 3,000 represents an neshama starting off in the lowest possible awareness of Hashem and elevating till eventually it's got the highest potential awareness of Hashem. Therefore, if a soul has experienced 3,000 years of Gan Eden, and not just experienced it in a passive way, but experienced it in a dynamic way, like a soul of the caliber of Moshe would experience, then that means that neshama has pulled down 3,000 different levels of obscuring, 3,000 different metaphors that have hidden the real story, 3,000 layers of obscuring. The neshama has gone through all of that and now can actually see things in their truth. That's what it means that Moshe or whoever has been up in Gan Eden for 3,000 years. They're at the point of confronting truth. In fact, people of that caliber, after their 3,000 years of experience in Gan Eden, their neshamas are transported into a totally different realm and reality, which is called the world of Atzilus. Atzilus is no longer a world of experience of Hashem, knowledge of Hashem, insight into Hashem. Rather, it is a reality of exposure to Hashem. So, I mean, it's difficult for us to understand exactly what that means. Atzilus is way beyond anything that we could appreciate and understand. It's such a powerful and deep level of revelation of godliness that the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, couldn't even finish writing the word because it becomes so overcome from the exposure. You know, if you can imagine being in a place where there's some kind of radiation, so great people are able to feel the spiritual radiation of even talking about the concept. We don't begin to understand the concept. What we do want to illustrate and emphasize over here is that after all of this time, those great and powerful neshamas are at the highest possible level that a neshama can hope to achieve. Nevertheless, in spite of all of that incredible spiritual achievement, those souls will still come back into this world and be replaced into bodies so that they can have the ultimate revelation of Hashem. It's a mind-blowing thought. Why? Because fundamentally, the divine revelation that will take place at the time of the resurrection after Mashiach comes will be exponentially greater than any revelation that any neshama could ever experience in Gan Eden, even if that neshama had pulled away every level of obscuring that might exist. In other words, if you've got a neshama that is in touch with the highest degree of divine revelation that Gan Eden could potentially offer, which is something you and I will never begin to scratch the surface of, that's nothing compared to what that same neshama will experience once Mashiach comes and it is restored to a human form. Okay, all of this was parenthetical. Remember, this is all one big bracket. Why did we have this conversation? Because we're trying to make a distinction over here between the experience of Gan Eden and the experience of what will happen when Mashiach comes. And one of the biggest distinctions that we wanted to draw was that in Gan Eden, in order to elevate yourself from one spiritual level to the next, there is a grading process. And part of that grading process requires that the neshama gets rid of old thinking in order to be open to brand new thinking. Now we've finished the brackets. Let's see how it's going to work when Mashiach comes. Mashenken idea shiyu b'yemosam Mashiach yu beofen shelo yitztorich latzis mimatzav madrigosai mekaven sha'aziyah agilu doron sof habli gvul va'agilu yiyeh gam lemata. What's going to happen in the time of Mashiach is fascinating. See, life as we know it requires that a person constantly grows and develops, or you get left behind. That's life as we know it. You know, there's a certain period in a person's life where people step in and they help us and they guide us and they teach us and they hold our hand, and that's how we grow and develop. But then you become an independent, mature adult, and now it's your responsibility. And if you don't grow and if you don't learn, you fall behind. So, for example, if you had somebody who went to medical school and they qualified and they were really good at what they did, but they don't keep up with current medical journals, and they don't know what's happening in the world of medicine, eventually they'll become irrelevant. So we understand that, we know that, and we expect that. A person constantly has to invest the effort in order to be able to grow. The uniqueness of Mashiach is that at the time of Mashiach, there'll be growth without that need for investment. Now, a lot of people find that quite disconcerting, because that sounds like, are you telling me we're not going to grow? Are you telling me we're going to be kind of static when Mashiach comes? No, not at all. It just means it won't have the stress that is normally associated with growth. Not everybody embraces the lessons that cause growth. We're happy to grow, but why did it have to be through so many difficulties? Why did I have to go through this in order to grow? Why couldn't it just be smooth sailing? There are times in life where incredible growth happens because of amazing, beautiful things that happen. Yes, of course, people grow because of challenge. Yes, of course, people grow out of loss. Yes, of course, people grow when they have to reassess their values and their priorities. I mean, look at the world right now. There's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for growth, should we choose to take it, because we're being forced to reassess how everything works in life. And yet some people shrug their shoulders and say, this is just terrible and I can't wait for it to end, and don't see the opportunity for growth. That said, there are other opportunities that come up in life that are completely positive. A person, for example, grows by becoming a parent. Great bracha, what a beautiful thing. You've been given this incredible gift of a child. It's unbelievable. It gives nachas in a way that a person could never have imagined. And you grow from it. Not all growth has to come through challenge and adversity. There's definitely the possibility of smooth, comfortable, happy growth. So Gan Eden, which is still operating in a realm of divine revelation where everything is calibrated and everything is designed for the individual, there the growth requires some level of stress, because the individual has to change to key into the next level. The levels are there if you're ready for them, and if you're not ready for them, you have to work to become ready for them. However, the experience of Mashiach is that there'll be a revelation of godliness that is not dependent on your readiness, that is not limited by your limitations. It will just flow. It will just, so constantly on a daily basis, we'll be growing, developing, opening our eyes to new realities just without the stress. It's like, if you can imagine being, sometimes you get into it, right? You get into your stride. Things are just working. They move from one thing to the next to the next. You feel that it's so enriching. You feel that it's so uplifting. You feel that there is growth, and thank God it's not taking all the frustration that usually comes with growth. That's the kind of thing that will happen when Mashiach comes, except much, much more so. So, is that the full story? Do we now understand how it all works? Have we now comfortably said Gan Eden is a place of graded, calibrated, personalized divine energy which requires the person to be ready for it? Mashiach is a revelation of, so to speak, one size fits all, godly revelation on his terms. So it's irrelevant where you're standing. Okay, there we go. We've packed it all up. We understand. We get the difference. But there's still more. And so he wraps up the Maimer by telling us, so far we've spoken about Gan Eden versus the time of Mashiach. This Maimer was supposed to tell us about Olam Haba, what happens once Mashiach is here and we move to the next phase and we have the resurrection of the dead, and everybody is included. What happens then? So paragraph Zion, which is the final paragraph of the Maimer. However, even the revelation of Hashem that will happen in the time of Moshiach is still graded in some way. Why? Because we spoke over here about growth. If we're growing, that means that we're constantly getting more and more and more. Or to use a different expression, we're going higher and higher and higher. So yes, it's fair to say that it's without the stress. And it's fair to say that it's not necessarily rated or calibrated according to my particular personal needs. So we as a whole, as the entire Jewish people, are being elevated from one day to the next in the time of Mashiach. Still, you're talking about progression. You're talking, therefore, about something that has restrictions. Today is not as powerful as tomorrow will be. So today is restricted. Then I arrive at tomorrow and I think, wow, this is unbelievable. Can't get better than this. Well, the next day is going to be even more powerful, which means that even tomorrow was restricted. However, what's going to happen at the time of the resurrection is that there will be this, so to speak, automatic, collective, consistent experience of godly revelation. Why? Because what will be revealed in the time of the resurrection is Hashem's essence. Okay, we need to understand this. Now we have three terms. Memale kol almin. That's where Hashem chooses to reveal himself in a way that is designed and suited and calibrated for the individual, what you can handle as you are. Then there's a greater level called soivev kol almin. Soivev kol almin is, I am going to expose you to godliness as I am, even if you're not ready for it. So the expression, if you translate it, is that which surrounds all of the worlds. Or to use language that you and I can relate to, greater than us. And now we've introduced a new concept, which is Hashem's essence. Let's try and understand this. So in our relationships with people, we have various relationships, and most of our relationships are a memale kol almin relationship, which means I only share with you relative to how valuable you are in my life. So it's what we call the need-to-know basis. Some people, how are you? Fine. That's it. Or as we say in South Africa, fine, thanks, and you? Which basically means, leave me alone, I'm not interested in discussing this. That's what you're not that close to me, I'm not sharing that much with you. Somebody else comes along and asks you, so how are you? Spill your guts. Because this is somebody you trust, somebody you know, you have a deep relationship, you know that you can share the stuff with them and you will get the support that you need. That's a memale kol almin reality. It's relevant, it's relative, it's calibrated, it depends on the nature of our connection. So that's Gan Eden. Depending on your relationship with Hashem, that's how much Hashem is going to give you. Then there's something called soivev kol almin. You know what soivev kol almin means? It means this. Let's say that you've just got the most amazing news. Amazing news. Birth of a grandchild. Engagement of a child. Huge business deal that you've been working on for years and it's finally come together. Somebody's, thank God, recovered from a dread illness that they battled for, whatever it is. And you are euphoric. So what do? You get the message on your phone. What do? Look around, check who's in the room, see if it's appropriate to be happy yet. If it's my close people, then I'll be happy. If it's not such close people, I won't. No. You look at the phone and without even realizing, woohoo, you scream, you yell, you're excited because it's so overwhelming that it does not take into consideration the specifics of who might be around me. That's soivev kol almin. It's bigger than everybody. It's bigger than the whole story. It's bigger than the context. I could be on a crowded bus and I'll scream and yell with excitement because this is something that is so important and so deep and so valuable. And then somebody might come over and say, what was that about? And I say, oh no, nothing. Because ultimately, now that I've kind of come back down into the memale, we don't have that relationship. No, I got some good news. Somebody else comes and what was all that about? Remember, it happened. So even Sovev Kol Olmin, even when we're dealing with something that is completely beyond the scope of, nice, neat little boxes, it still has some degree of relationship with those around me. Then there's the essence. There's the essence of me. And the essence of me, I'm afraid to say, can't be shared. Can't. I can share with somebody everything that I think, everything that I feel, all my memories, all my aspirations, and you still won't know my essence. Because the essence of something cannot be shared. It can only be experienced. And the only way you can experience it is from the inside. I know my essence, not in my head, not in my heart, with my whole being. I just know it. And it's not some sophisticated, deep concept that I just don't know how to put it into words. It's my essence. This is me. You will never experience life the way I do. You just won't. And even if I tell you my deepest secrets, you'll still filter them through your essence. So when Hashem reveals himself in Gan Eden, he's not revealing himself. He's revealing what he's willing to share. When he reveals himself in the time of Mashiach, it's like, yay! He's revealing himself. Now you get an insight. Wow, okay, I got it. But when it's the time of the revelation, then he takes us into his essence. It's almost, so to speak, like a view from the inside. And when you have an appreciation for the essence of something, you no longer need the details. Details are always step by step by step by step. First you explain this, then you explain that. First you experience this, then you experience that. When you've got the essence, you've got the whole thing at once. So once you're in that space of the essence of Hashem in the time of the revelation of the resurrection of the dead, you don't have to climb any more ladders. You don't have to progress any further. You've got it. You've got the essence. Now the essence is infinite, so there'll always be more to experience. But the more to experience won't be going down a road, going through a journey, learning more. It's just like I settle into this experience more and more and more. That itself has two parts. That itself has two parts. It's going to happen in two phases. The first phase will be, Hashem will say, because of all the mitzvahs that you did, and every one of us has done more mitzvahs than we could ever imagine. So he'll say, because of the mitzvahs that you have done, you are now in touch with my essence. And because of that, you'll get in touch with your essence. In other words, we tend often to think about our relationship with Hashem as being a reward or consequence relationship. If we do what we're supposed to, he'll be good to us and he'll give us the things that we want. If we don't do what we're supposed to, he might withhold things from us. And so kind of we think of us and Hashem as having some kind of a distance between us, and sometimes the distance is less and sometimes it's more. What's going to happen at the time of Mashiach is we'll not only be, specifically at the time of the resurrection, not only exposed to his essence, but exposed to our essence. And then suddenly we discover we were never distant. We could never have been distant. We felt distant. We imagined distant. But we're actually one with him. That's when we discover that the root of our souls is in a deeper part of Hashem than even where Torah and mitzvahs come from. That means to say, Torah and mitzvahs are tools that we use in this world to help us to experience our neshama. But it's not to create the connection between our neshama and Hashem. That connection's already there. I'm just not feeling it. In fact, one of the things that we'll experience when Mashiach comes is not only that Hashem's essence is connected to our souls, but this is the fascinating thing, that Hashem's essence is deeply invested in our bodies. That's why the neshamas have to come back down into bodies. If the whole relationship that we had between us and Hashem was only a spiritual relationship, then the ultimate goal would be for our souls to be in heaven, connecting that way. But what Hashem wants to illustrate to us is that he cares about and connects with us from the essence of his being not only to the essence of our soul, but even to the physical form of our bodies. So it's quite a fascinating principle, because essentially what he's teaching us over here is when we say Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek la'olam haba, that every single Jew has a portion in the world to come, what that's telling us is not just a prediction about the future, but a statement about who we are. It's a statement that we are individuals who deserve to be and are fundamentally one with Hashem, regardless of what we may or may not have done in our lives. Right now, our work is to try and feel that connection, and Torah and mitzvahs bring it to the fore. At that time, the connection will be completely revealed for us. So we hope, obviously, that experience shouldn't be way off in the future, that rather we should have the coming of Mashiach immediately, and we should go very quickly from the initial stage of Mashiach to the advanced stage of Mashiach with the time of the resurrection, and through that not only be able to read about this concept in a book, in a mimer, because that's always nice, but rather to experience it firsthand, which please God should happen immediately. So